Tonight at midnight, a patent expires. Not your patent. You have not owned it directly for 19 years. You transferred it through 4 entities across 3 jurisdictions in the 18 months after you built the first version of the company, when the lawyers told you the structure was clean and the distance was sufficient and the expiration date was so far in the future that it existed in the category of problems that money would solve before they arrived. Tonight it arrives. You are sitting in your office on the 43rd floor of a building whose lobby has your name on it, and you are looking at a clock on your desk that your assistant gave you as a joke 3 years ago, because you are the kind of person who does not need a clock, and that you have kept because the joke was accurate, and sometimes accurate things deserve to be kept regardless of their comfort. 11:47. 13 minutes. Your phone has been ringing since 6 this morning. Not the main line. The specific line whose number exists in 12 places in the world, and that rings when something is happening at the level where things actually happen. You have answered 4 of the calls. You have not answered 11. The 4 you answered told you what the 11 would also tell you. That the filing was discovered. That the timeline has been reconstructed. That the people who needed to understand the relationship between the patent and the fortune and the 19 years of distance between them have understood it, and are now in the specific position of people who understand something that changes everything they thought they understood before. 11:48. You built something real. This is the thing you want said clearly before anything else is said, because the realer version of events is not the one that the filing will suggest, and clarity matters to you, even now, especially now when clarity is the one thing the next 12 minutes cannot give you back. You built something real. The patent was a foundation. The foundation was not yours. The building was. 11:49. Chapter 1. What the patent was. 23 years ago you were 31 years old and working in a research division of a pharmaceutical company, whose name you will not say in public for reasons that are about to become considerably more visible than they have been for 19 years. You were a researcher. Specifically a biochemist with a focus on protein synthesis mechanisms that had applications in drug delivery that the industry had been circling for a decade without landing on the specific approach that would make the applications commercially viable. You landed on it. Not alone. This is the honest version, and the honest version is the only one worth rehearsing in the 13 minutes remaining, because the dishonest version has had 19 years to be rehearsed, and tonight it stops mattering. Not alone. A colleague named Marcus Webb, who was 3 years ahead of you in the division, and whose thinking on the structural problem was the specific contribution that made your own contribution possible. You were working in parallel. You were sharing informal notes the way researchers in proximity share informal notes, casually, without the institutional framework of formal collaboration, over coffee and whiteboards and the specific generative friction of 2 people thinking hard about the same problem from adjacent angles. The breakthrough came on a Tuesday. Yours. Specifically yours in the sense that the final synthesis was yours and the documentation was yours and the filing was yours, because Marcus Webb was on medical leave for 6 weeks beginning the Monday before the Tuesday, and the timing produced a gap in the formal record that you filled with a filing that described the synthesis as individual work, because individual work was what the filing deadline required and the deadline did not accommodate the complexity of informal collaboration and parallel thinking and the specific question of whose contribution weighted more heavily in a final synthesis that one person documented and one person missed. You told yourself this was technically accurate. The synthesis was yours. The documentation was yours. The filing was yours. That Marcus Webb's thinking had been the necessary precondition for your synthesis was a philosophical question rather than a legal one, and the legal question was the one the filing answered, and the filing was technically accurate. Marcus Webb returned from medical leave. He read the filing. He said nothing for 3 weeks. Then he said something, and what he said required a conversation, and the conversation produced an agreement, and the agreement produced a payment, a significant payment routed through a structure that made it look like a consulting arrangement, and a document that Marcus Webb signed that assigned all interest in the work to you in exchange for the payment, and a confidentiality provision whose term was tied to the life of the patent. The patent life is 20 years. 20 years from filing. The filing was 19 years ago 11 months, and tonight at midnight the 20 years ends and the confidentiality provision ends with it, and Marcus Webb, who has been living quietly in a house outside Seattle on the interest from an investment account funded by a consulting payment from 19 years ago, becomes a person who can say anything he wants to say about a Tuesday and a filing and a breakthrough that had 2 people thinking hard about the same problem from adjacent angles. Chapter 2. 19 years of distance. You did not spend 19 years thinking about this. You spent 19 years building, and the building required the kind of focused forward attention that does not accommodate looking backward, and you told yourself this was discipline, and sometimes it was discipline, and sometimes it was the specific practiced habit of not examining the foundation of a building you were living in. The company you built on the patent became 3 companies, and the 3 companies became a portfolio, and the portfolio became the kind of wealth that stops being about money and starts being about the grammar it produces, the way institutions speak to you, the way rooms arrange themselves differently when you enter them. The 43 floors with your name in the lobby. The clock your assistant gave you as a joke. The 12 numbers in the world that ring the specific line when things are happening at the level where things actually happen. You hired people to watch the patent. Its expiration date was in every asset review, every legal briefing, every long-range planning document your advisors produced across 19 years. You knew the date the way you know the terms of any critical contract. Precisely. Without having to check. November 14th at midnight. You had 19 years to resolve it cleanly. You had 19 years to find Marcus Webb and restructure the arrangement, and create a version of the story that acknowledged the parallel thinking and the adjacent angles and the informal notes over coffee and whiteboards in a way that cost you something real, but produced a foundation for the next 19 years that did not have tonight at the end of it. You did not do this. Not because you could not. Because doing it would have required saying directly what the filing had allowed you to say only indirectly, and there is a specific kind of person who can sustain 19 years of a building without examining the foundation, and you have been that person, and the not examining was its own momentum that carried you to the 43rd floor and the lobby with your name and 11:47 on a clock that your assistant gave you because you are the kind of person who does not need one. 11:52. 8 minutes. Chapter 3, What Marcus Webb Did with His Time. You know because you had him watched. Not continuously. Periodically. The way you monitor anything whose status matters to your risk assessment. He has been quiet. The house outside Seattle. The investment account. A daughter who is a teacher in Portland. A life whose scale is consistent with the payment from 19 years ago, intelligently managed, and whose public presence is essentially zero. 3 months ago that changed. Not dramatically. Not a press interview or a legal filing or a direct communication to you. A conversation. Specifically a conversation with a journalist who covers pharmaceutical intellectual property for a publication whose readership is small and whose influence in the specific community of people who understand patent history and corporate foundation stories is disproportionate to its circulation. Your people found the conversation through the journalist's communications, which are monitored by a security firm you retain for exactly this kind of early visibility. The conversation was preliminary. Marcus Webb was not telling the story. He was describing the story's existence to someone who would understand its value. He was testing the market for a Tuesday and a filing and a breakthrough that had 19 years of distance between the having and the telling. The journalist understood its value. Your people assessed what the journalist's understanding would produce on the timeline of the patent's expiration. The assessment was accurate. Tonight the filing was discovered through a source your people have not yet identified, and the 12 calls began, and 4 of them told you what 11 of them would also tell you. 11:56. 4 minutes. Chapter 4, The Call You Make. You pick up your phone at 11:57. You call a number you have not called in 7 years, the last time your periodic monitoring of Marcus Webb's status produced something that required direct management, and that was managed, and that produced a further period of quiet that lasted until 3 months ago. He answers on the 3rd ring. His voice has the quality of someone who is not asleep and who has been waiting for this call with the specific patience of someone who has been waiting for 19 years and for whom 3 more minutes is not a meaningful interval. You say his name. He says yours. Neither of you says anything else for a moment. The moment has the weight of 19 years in it, and the weight is distributed differently between you than it was when you were both 30 years old and thinking hard about the same problem from adjacent angles, and one of you went on medical leave on a Monday. You say you want to discuss the arrangement. He says the arrangement ended at midnight. You look at the clock. 11:59. You say the arrangement as it was structured ends at midnight, but that arrangements can be restructured and that you are calling because restructuring now before midnight is different from restructuring after midnight in ways that are significant for both of you. He is quiet for a moment. Then he says something you did not prepare for. He says he does not want restructuring. He says he has not contacted the journalist to damage you. He says he contacted the journalist because he has a daughter who is a teacher in Portland and a life built on a foundation he has thought about for 19 years, and that what he wants is not money and not restructuring and not another document to sign. He says he wants the Tuesday acknowledged. The whiteboards. The informal notes. The adjacent angles. He says he wants a version of the story that exists in the public record that a teacher in Portland can read and understand, and that contains her father's name in the correct proximity to a synthesis that would not have happened without his thinking being the necessary precondition for it. You look at the clock. Midnight. Chapter 5. What the Foundation Was Always Worth. You call the journalist at 12:14. Your assistant has been trying to reach her since 6 this morning. You have not returned those calls because returning them before midnight would have been managing a crisis, and calling at 12:14 is something different. You are not certain what it is. You are certain it is different. You tell the journalist you want to give her the full story. Not the story the filing suggests. The full story. The Tuesday and the whiteboards and Marcus Webb and the medical leave and the filing deadline and the payment and the confidentiality provision and 19 years of a foundation that held the building up and that you did not examine because examining it would have required saying directly what the filing said only indirectly. She listens. She asks 3 questions. You answer all 3 completely. This is the most expensive thing you have done in 19 years, and it does not cost money, and the not costing money is the specific quality of it that you sit with after you hang up. Your fortune was built on a secret. The secret was not the patent. The patent was technical and legal, and the expiration was always on the calendar. The secret was simpler. A man was thinking alongside you and went on medical leave on a Monday, and you filed on a Tuesday, and the filing was technically accurate, and technically accurate is not the same as true, and you have been living in the distance between those 2 things for 19 years in a building with your name in the lobby and a clock on your desk that your assistant gave you as a joke. The joke was that you are the kind of person who does not need a clock. The accuracy was that you are the kind of person who always knows what time it is. You knew tonight was coming. You have always known tonight was coming. The 19 years were not avoidance. They were the specific momentum of a building whose foundation you had committed to not examining and that carried you here, to the 43rd floor, to 12:14 in the morning, to a phone call with a journalist and a conversation with a man outside Seattle who wanted his daughter to be able to read the true version of a Tuesday. The building still stands. The lobby still has your name. The fortune is still the fortune. What changes tonight is the foundation story. What it was built on is now what it was built on in the public record, rather than in the distance between technically accurate and true. You look at the clock. 12:19. The joke that was accurate. You stand up. You go to the window. 43 floors below the city is doing what cities do at this hour, running without knowing what just changed in a building above it, indifferent to the specific weight of a foundation being examined for the first time by the person who built on it. The clock ticks. The city runs. You look at the building's reflection in the glass and you think about Marcus Webb and a Tuesday and the specific cost of a foundation that held for 19 years and that tonight, finally, cost exactly what it was always going to cost. You stay at the window until the light changes. Then you go home.